let's say, there I am, I'm Chris. Wow-wee, let's do stuff. All right, let's talk about things. All right, so we head on over to our classic warrior horses list. Now, our warrior horses, they track all sorts of things in their list, and in lists and across their site. And one thing they were disturbed by is there doesn't seem to be an out-of-the-box template to track parts of their anatomy in SharePoint. And of course, that is something we all want to do. So for this case, we're just going to have to create our own list for that, right? So we'll create our own anatomy list. This is important if you're trying to keep track of all your limbs or organs, or whatever other various parts you want to check out there and track inside SharePoint. So you create your anatomy list, as we all do. All right, and then we're going to add a couple of columns, right? So the first thing we'll add is, who is this person, right? Who is the horse? All right, and we'll just say, yeah, that's fine, and we're going to require it. Sounds great. So you got to specify your horse. All right, and then we're going to say, just for now, we'll start off easy, and we're just going to say a number. How many legs do you have, right? And so for the legs, we're going to say the default value is 4. And we're going to come down here, and we're going to say our minimum value is 0, and our maximum value is 4. All right, and we're going to require this column contains information as well. Perfect, great. So let's save that, and then let's go ahead and let's hide this time. We don't need this thing. Get out of here. You get out of here, you silliness. Perfect. Okay, we're going to get rid of that. So now we have this very cool list. Wow. Let's just add a couple of entries here, right? So I add like Tiny Horse Jr., right? And we'll keep 4 legs is fine for all these guys, right? And we'll say Tony the Pony. That sounds good. And I got another horse somewhere, right? Yeah, Vigo Horsenberg. Perfect. All right, so we've got these horses, right? We're just going to edit that or exit that. So they've all got 4 legs. And that's it for my demo. I just can't, David. Wouldn't that be funny?
I said he wasn't ready, right?
I just wanted to show you how to create a list with legs in it. All right, good. We're all done. All right, just good. All right, so let's take a look at how we can make this editing experience kind of cool, right? So we're going to column settings. We're going to format this column. And we're going to go to advanced mode. And I'm going to just paste one that I've already got over here, and then we'll take a look at what I'm doing and how we can customize it further. So let's paste it and hope it works, and boom, it did. All right, so what we've done here is we've added a couple of buttons, right? Added a minus button and a plus button, and we'll take a look at what that looks like in a second, but the idea here is if I hit minus, right, it subtracts the value down to 3, and if I hit plus, right, it'll go back up to 4 or so on, right? So Tiny Horse, poor little guy, has only got a couple of legs. I mean, he is tiny, and maybe that's why. All right, so there we go. So now that's kind of what we're doing. So how are we handling that? So let's see. We've got a couple of things we're doing. One, you'll notice when I hover over this, I'm actually able to edit this field directly, right? So I could say something like, 3, and when I click off it, it just automatically saves. You see that updated list item. Wow, 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 right? Or we could come in here and we could try and mess it up, right? We could say like 18, right? And we do that. We're going to see our minimum and maximum values are enforced, right? Because we set those up, so that's pretty cool. Or if we set up custom column validation or so on, we could have that show up there too. But we're also, you'll notice this thing gets disabled, right? So we're also handling some of that right here inside our editor, right? So we get down to 0, you can't do that anymore. So let's take a look at how we're doing all of that. So the first part is actually pretty easy, and that's this inline edit field. And so we come down here, and all we're doing is where we're showing it. So we've got this div right here. Right, and all this thing is it's got a thing to make it look pretty on the color, but then it's just saying, hey, whatever the value is of the field, just show it, right? And if you use the display value, you don't need to use the display value, but that helps it look extra pretty. And then we're saying that inline edit field trick, we've looked at a number of times, of just at current field, that automatically adds this fanciness right here. Now, we could do a few other things with this, right? Like, so we could make this look a little prettier. And in fact, let's do that. So let's add a style, because one of the things I don't like necessarily about this, right, is it just, look how cramped that is. That's no good, right? So let's fix that. So that inline editor, right, is largely going to be determined by whatever your element is, right? So it's just taking that. So if we come in here and we say our own padding on it, right? So we say our padding, and in this case, we're going to say 2 pixels, 8 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels. Great. Okay. So if we preview that, now we get a little more spacing in there, right? So now it's a little more like an actual text box we want to do. There are actually some very custom styles that have been added here, right? So we can actually say inline editor border radius. Ooh, catchy, right? And then we can say, man, we just love those so much. Like 8 pixels, right? We can do that. Why not? All right, and so now we get ourselves a nice round thing there. I don't know, I like the round, right? So we can take that back down to 4 pixels, kind of match everything else, all the buttons and everything. I'll have that kind of 4 pixel look to them as well. There we go. So we'll just keep it at 4 pixels. Sounds great. There's a few others. We'll look at those at the end that really just control that border that gets added to whatever element you're putting this inline edit field on. Okay, now the other part. So let's take a look at what we're also doing here. So these guys right here. Now, it probably won't be very obvious from looking at it, but we have 4 elements, right? So we have 4 elements that make up these 2 buttons we see. And the reason we're doing that is basically these 2 are the subtract button and these 2 are the plus button. And what we're doing is we're drawing one that's for for disabled, right? So that's the second one right here. So all we're doing here is we're just showing an icon. We're not doing anything to it, so we don't get any there's no actions associated. There's no cursor issue, no changes. There's nothing going on there. There's no hover styles. It's just neutral tertiary to give it that nice grayed out look. And then we're saying display this if the current field, right, is where it can actually subtract, right? So as long as it's above 0, go for it, right? So this is where we put our minimum or maximum. We're going to enforce those here. And then the other one is the actual active one, which is a little more complicated. And the reason we do this is separate so we can apply different styles and we don't have to put that same expression everywhere because that gets really irritating. It's a lot easier to just have these elements we turn on or off as needed. All right, so in this case, we've got this, and here's the key. All right, this custom row action, instead of an inline edit field, we're setting the value. All right, we're saying the legs column, just whatever it is, subtract 1. Now we know that we could put in like if statements. We could get really fancy here, right, to like do all that. But by doing it this way, we're saying, well, we're only going to show it if it's above 0. So we don't even need to do the check here. Now you could and have fun with that. And that's great. And we're doing the exact opposite thing, right? So you'll see it's just a +1 in the add. And the key here is that on our display, we use the exact same condition. We just swap the none and the blank, right? Based on if we want to show it or not, based on that same condition. You could try and write this as the opposite condition, like less than or equal to. And I'll tell you from experience, that seems great at first, but maintenance of that is very difficult. If you've got these kind of elaborate conditions, this one's pretty straightforward. We're going to look at one where we can go a little further than that, and let's take a look at that now. So we've got this. Wow. Let's add additional columns. Let's save that. And let's add a new column, right? Because we got more anatomy to track, right? And we'll just add a nice yes/no field here, and we're just going to say head. Do they got one or not, right? So the default is yes, they have a head. So we're going to save that, and we're going to pull it over here. It is required info. So let's just go give everyone a head, I guess, right? So we're going to edit this in the grid view once again. You got a head, you got a head, and you got a head. Wow. And I said all that, and actually, Tony the Pony, bad news, bro. No more head for you. Because Tony the Pony doesn't have a head anymore. So here's one of the things we can do, right? So is come up here, and I'm just going to save that view because I moved some stuff around. All right, let's go up here, and I'm going to format the current view. I'm just going to do a rule because that's the easiest way in this case. And I'm going to say, by default, don't apply any styling. Otherwise, let's add another rule, and let's look at that head column. Right, and when it is equal to no, they don't have a head, right? Well, then let's just do this lovely thing here, right? So now we're just going to make it red, right? Now you don't have a head, so that's cool. So now we're interacting, right? So now we've got that on top of it. You can see it's playing nicely with our format here because we added this little white border around it to make it look fancy, right? But it's still editable, which is a little weird because, like, why are we tracking their legs if they haven't had a head, right? So let's change that a little bit. So let's come back into our format. And let's come up here, and the first thing we're going to do is, well, we don't really want it to look like it's editable, so let's change that class. It's determined in that white, and the reason we're using a class for this, by the way, instead of just, having the background color as white here in our style is because this will play, that white will actually swap over to the dark, like the black color if you swap over to a dark theme. So that's helpful, but we can rewrite this as a quick expression, right? We can say equals if, and we can say that, head column, right? So if they got the head, all right, then I want you to do the white. Otherwise, I don't want you to do a class at all. And now when we preview that, now we can see we still get that nice little white background for when we've got that selection thing, but now it's not there, so that makes it look a little less like it's interactive. And we can come down a little further, right? And so we already have nice disabled states, right? So let's come down to our disabled states, and let's just make those better. So one of the things we want to do is we want to stop showing the add button, All right, well, first let's go ahead and make it so we can actually see both buttons. There you go. All right, so we want to stop showing that, right? So let's save that. And let's go down here to this current field, -1, right? This is the one that's actually doing the stuff. And so what we want to do is we just want to say head and, right? And if we do that, right, you see that goes away because head's not true. And so we're literally just going to grab that head and we're just going to flop it in there. That's the term, flop it in. All right, I'm going to flop it in there. I don't actually like that term. Stuff. Right. Got one there. I got one here. Okay, boom. Right, so there we go. Preview that. And now it automatically disables, right, no matter what. But we still have this other issue with this inline edit field. And so the way we would solve that is we come up here to where we've got that inline edit field, and we're going to do the exact same thing we were doing before, which is we're going to just use because we can't do a conditional thing really inside this inline edit field. We're just going to add another guy here, and instead we're not going to have the inline edit field. Just take that out, right? So then we don't need this. We'll keep the padding the same, right? But then we'll just keep all of this just like that, except it doesn't have inline edit. The key is, right, so if we were to preview that right now, we would see that we have two of these. Whoops, we don't want two, but one of them is not editable, right? And so now we can say, instead of neutral primary, we can say neutral tertiary. There we go. So that looks better, right? But now let's add our same kind of display thing, right? So now we're just going to put as our display, right? We're going to say equals if that heed, right? Heed move. All right, if heed. All right, we're going to say just show it. Otherwise, we're going to say none, right? And there we go. Actually, I think we need to reverse that, don't we? Because this is the, yeah, okay, let's decide that. Boom, so that goes away. All right, so now we just take this exact same thing here, and let's go up to our one we had before, right here in our styles, add a comma, paste that in, and the difference is, again, we're going to just swap these like this. Boom, ba-doom, aha! So there we go. So now we've disabled our editing basically based on a whole other property, right? So they don't have a head. We don't really want to provide that nice little functionality. Ooh, that's exciting. So, but let's go a little further, right? So now we got this legs thing. We want to track something else, right? So let's go ahead and just close that. Let's add another column. We're going to add another number column, right? And we're going to call this laser shoes, right? So this is their laser shoes that are attached to their legs. Now we're going to do kind of the same thing here. We're going to say, the default value is going to be 0 on this one, but we're going to say it has the same minimum 0, maximum of 4, right? Because it's going to match those legs. We're just going to say save. Even though we put a default value, right? We don't get those in there. So let's edit these real quick just to make it easier, right? So they have 0, 0, 0. Actually, that's not sad. Let's make this, they have all 3 laser shoes. Perfect. Okay, great. So now we've got some laser shoes, right? It's all playing nicely. And we can add that same kind of thing. So if we come into here and we say format this column, and again, I'm just going to Control A, Control C, copy that whole thing, and I'm going to switch over to my laser shoes column, advanced mode. I'm going to apply that same thing here. It won't actually work right off the bat. And that's because we have these action inputs. We can't use the @current field here. We have to actually put the internal name of the column. And so what we're going to do is we do Control F right here, and we can say wherever we say legs, right? And there's 2 spots. Just say laser shoes instead, all right? That's the one we really want to edit now. Perfect. Okay, so now if we preview that, all right, it looks pretty much the same because it's going to edit the laser shoes column, right? Well, you notice there's something weird there, right? If I hit plus on this, I can't have more laser shoes than I have legs. That doesn't make any sense, right? So let's get that corrected. So if we come down here to our current one, all we really want to do is see our laser shoes. We want to disable it, right? So we want to look at the adding, right? So let's go there into subtraction. Let's go down to the adding, right? So we have our add to is the icon name right there. Perfect. So we got our increase here. And so what we want to do is say, we have this like display, right? Is if heed and current field and blah, blah, blah. And so now we're going to say, instead of less than 4, right, we're just going to say legs, right? So the value of the other column, right? So if we preview that, you'll see that goes away. We'll have to also, of course, add the same condition. And again, this is why I said, don't change your conditions, change the other part so you can easily keep copying and pasting your conditions as they get more complicated. Boom. So now, right, so just doing that, we can't exceed the number of legs we have with our laser shoes, right? If we increase our legs, I didn't save, so let's save. Now we can increase our laser shoes, right? And so on. So go down, now we can't. So that's pretty cool. So now we've tied these two together a little bit. But we do have one issue, right? Whereas if this is actually going to be truly connected, right? If we add a leg here, that'd be fine. That works. But what if we were to subtract a leg? What? That doesn't make sense, right? So let's fix that too. So let's go to column settings. We're going to format this column, and we're going to go down to our legs. And when you hit, to our subtraction, right? So that's up at the top here. I don't know where that is. Let's see, blocked. The icon name, block 12. All right, so we got our decrease here. And so now we're going to say, I don't even remember what we're trying to do. We're trying to also set the other value, right? So this is what we need to do. So we also want to set laser shoes here. So we're going to also say, whenever you edit this thing, set the laser shoes value as well. All right, and we're going to say an if statement. So we're going to say if the laser shoes, all right, is less than or equal to the the value that's going to be, which is at current field -1, right? So if it is less than or equal to that, then you don't need to do anything, right? It's already fine. So just use whatever the value for laser shoes is, right? Just keep it the same. So really, we're not changing anything here, right? Otherwise, go ahead and set it to whatever the legs are, which is going to be current field -1, all right? So let's take a look and see if that works. Whoop, whoop. All right, preview that. So now we have this idea. Let's just save it. So if I decrease the legs, it decreases my laser shoes as well. But I can increase these so they're not truly tied together, right? And except for when I'm saying I cannot possibly have that many laser shoes. And so now what we've got, right, is we've got a view format, right? Just the additional row class on top here, which is this nice thing, which indicates we don't have a head. Very obvious, because very important information. We also have these inline editors that are both sensitive to that field and to each other, right? So they're interacting with each other. We've got this kind of inline edit experience. We've customized the styles around that. And then that's it. I want to go over to the slides and kind of wrap this up. But you can start to see there's some real power here. Womp womp. There we go. All right. So real quick, just to cover this. So the inline edit field, here's the supported fields, right? I've also found these are also working. So if you're doing this, you could just add that inline edit field. It'll work. We've got lots of examples of that in our samples repo. And when you're doing that, right, so you can use this at current field in the column formats, right? That's a really easy way to not have to hard code your current field into that inline edit field. But you can also, just like we looked at, we can edit other fields with the set value. You can also do it with inline edit field. In other words, you could have a view format that's had inline edit field for different fields all over the place. You just use that internal name. And then this is what's going to, by default, right, you get this kind of 2-pixel border around everything and that neutral primary. But again, if you want to change that, well, good news. These are those specialized styles. So if you use these just like you would any other style, they're going to map that to those inline editor border fields that get applied on hover. Okay, so there you go. That's that. Now, one last thing here is we have a couple of samples that really illustrate the same principles I was just showing here. Some of them are a little more elaborate, right? So we've got one that's the number level bar. It's an editor that shows a very similar type experience. It's not a spin editor, but it is showing how you can have that constrained up and down with disabling. And then we have the ELF progress board, which is doing some of these spin numbers, but it's also demonstrating how to do that across a progress bar with multiple fields all inside a view format. So it's a little more advanced, but it'll show you how we can apply some of these techniques we looked at today a little more. And that's it for me.
Awesome, Chris. So quick question. Keep that up for a second, by the way. Everyone agrees that it was horse-tastic, right? But for those that maybe don't have a murderous equestrian enterprise at their fingertips, what are some of the ways in which you could see this being used in a more family-friendly business scenario?
Well, I don't help those kinds of people. Just kidding. No, actually, there's tons of. So again, if you take a look at some of these, here, let's go back over here real quick. So I actually have some of this. This was that number level bar, right? So this is this shows a threat level, but you can imagine you may have just a quick number or status you want to change, right? And you're showing it on a gauge, so that's a great way to do that. And then we also have this ELF progress bar where you can see it's a little. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit on that. There we go. We zoom in just a little bit. Right, you can see that same kind of inline edit field, plus or minus. This is also a bit of a ridiculous scenario, right? But the idea is it's showing how you could build these inline editors. Like we looked at a poll a while back, right, with those inline editors, because that is a really interesting scenario where if you don't want to provide, provide that I keep saying inline editor. If you want to edit things on the page, which is a lot better experience than just editing properties, right? Because it's a what you see is what you get kind of thing. That's where this kind of stuff really comes into play. So if you've got a regular field and maybe you've got a status, right? And you've got that status and it goes in order, right? And you just want to move to the next stage, you could have that as a drop down, right? Or you could just have a plus or a minus button to move it through those stages, right? So that's one good use case. You could also do this with icons and other stuff. So I use that a lot with the status type thing. But again, number fields are a real obvious editor too. Does that help answer your question, David?
Yep, absolutely. Just wanted to give everybody a little more context to some useful ways that they could use it practically. So that's really, really cool. And Chris said, like, this is a low formatting or low code way of formatting your data in a way that is going to make the experience better, right? So while your users are interacting with the data, it's going to be a better experience and it's going to lead to more adoption, and it won't just feel like a bunch of rows and columns. So awesome.
Well, and David, real quick, I just would like to say with that, the whole low code thing, what I just demonstrated is not truly low code, right? In terms of, there was quite a bit of complicated code and logic in that. Now, there's all sorts of things you do, just copy these samples, right? And then you could just tweak them, and that'll keep it pretty low code for you. Or you could use the design wizards, like we said. But really, the power is, when we say low code here, is I only need designer level permissions to apply these, right? So we're saying there's no package, there's no deployment, there's no app catalog for all these. That's the power of the low code in this sense. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. And like Chris said, the samples are there. So when you hear the words like no code, low code, sometimes it may feel like that's a little bit of a misnomer or a lie, right? But I think we all can copy and paste, to Chris's point. I know Hugo, Chris and I talk a lot about this in our workshops. You absolutely can just go copy and paste, and that is a good way to apply it and also learn. So don't think those samples are just there simply to contribute to or to have to use holistically. They're a great learning opportunity as well, I think. So to see how some of these things are put together. And then, as Chris said, JSON can get quite complex, but when you're starting at the smaller side, then there's a great opportunity to adopt it.